have to catch up a little. It's a better nitpick one.
Yep. 2, blah, blah, testing. That's sort of filling a lot of the green dots, which is probably a good thing.
I'll just give it a second.
Yep.
Sounds good. So we are
Cool.
good to go. So I'll just give you back your slides. Okay.
Yep, cool. Is it 2-finger scroll? Yep, sweet. Yep, cool.
Need to scroll up here on this screen instead.
Oh yeah, cool.
It's a bit awkward.
Yep.
Okay, we can start.
Cool. So, on the right screen. Yeah, cool. Actually, maybe the right buttons. So this is just a bit of an overview of poking at a commercial alarm system that I've been putting a little bit of time into over the last couple of whiles, on and off. So anyway, I'm Russ. That's my hipster mastodon social media thing. So what and why? Or why? Security systems are interesting, but so hey, alarms. Fixed code systems are simple and boring and trivial and not really worth spending much time on. So my thinking was, hey, get my hands on something a little bit less crap and check it out. So the specific alarm that I looked at, I'm not going to mention the name of the manufacturer because I've not contacted them about any of this and I don't expect them to care if I do, but I just don't want to run the risk of someone lawyering at me. So the specific alarm is on site. The criteria that were placed on me by the owner of the site were try not to set the alarm off, don't be disruptive of the staff working there during the day, and they didn't want me messing with all of the bits. The alarm claims to be manufactured in North America, but I sort of assume that's just assembled out of pieces manufactured in China. Imported, there's an Australian imported distributor. They are, as far as I can tell, mainly resold by alarm monitoring providers. And of course you can buy the bits and pieces, like the various components, off Amazon retailers. It's not like secure site stuff. I noticed the keypads in retail and small offices, so it's sort of entry-level business rather than dinky home stuff. So the components, there's a single console which lives in a secure area. It's the central unit, has got all of the main brains, siren, phone line connection, GSM 3G for reporting back to your monitoring service. Control panels, keypads and fobs used for arm and disarm, status display, and sort of just regular end user management, setting up new users, whatever. Plus various sensors and sirens, motion, door window open, smoke, glass break, all that sort of stuff. The control panels, keypads, fobs, and sensors and sirens are all RF attached. Usually battery, or they are primarily battery powered, although if you want, you can wire them into to a DC source for independent of your batteries running flat. Everything is two-way communications, so all of the sensors and control units even including the key fobs, are transmit receive to the console. New units or new remote units require enrolment with the alarm, so there's some kind of pairing process. They advertise RF jamming detection, which I first encountered by just jamming an arm from one of the keypads, and the keypad started making a very annoyed beep and flashing trouble on the screen. So, you know, there's some degree to which they are detecting and reporting jamming. They operate, or they advertise operating at 433 and 868 megahertz, which is interesting given that you're not actually allowed to operate. Oh, that's not how that's quite. You're not actually allowed to operate at 868 in Australia, because that's not licensed here. But presumably they just carried over a bunch of their marketing guff from the North American manufacturer. So look, you know, that's comms device enrollment to make a good system. You can do clock synchronization, given you've got bi-directional communication, you can keep a synchronized clock, you can keep track of what communications have occurred. So you should be able to, with the parts they've got, make something that's not trivial to work around. So, like, on the one hand, yay. On the other hand, I really don't want to be dumping firmware because that gets annoying. So, started out by doing just some plain captures just to see what was happening. The only comms I was able to identify coming out of this unit, they were all on 433.9 pulse width ASK, 1.6 kilobaud in both directions, all communication, so both from the central console and from the remote devices. A fairly simple preamble, no apparent sync word, 32 or 64-bit payload packet, and then a bit of trailer. If the remotes have got something to say, they just say it. If the console has something to say, it first sends about 0.1 second of mark space toggling as a wake-up signal for the remotes, because the remotes are battery-powered or potentially battery-powered, so they don't want to be running the radio like all the time. If they can just power it up every now and then, look for a wake-up signal, and if so, then actually start doing the receiving, that's better for battery life. I bodged up a little script in Lua Radio to capture packets off the air and dump them out in JSON. You'd obviously do the same thing with New Radio or whatever tools you like. So that's an example of one of the packets that I pulled out at some point. So timestamp the raw payload, which includes here, yeah, I'm on the right mouse, includes, so the preamble, 4 marks, a toggling series of mark space, 2 spaces, 6 marks, 2 spaces. The actual symbols are either mark space or mark space, which I interpret as 1 and 0 respectively. And then the trailer bit, signal strength, yeah, you know, in theory, it would be nice to have a proper RSSI, but that's just a strength number that I pulled out of the middle of my flow graph, and that was good enough for my purposes. And then the decoded payload with the header or the preamble and trailer stripped off, and the expanded PWM symbols just reduced down to actual useful symbols. The reason for collecting the signal strength is to attribute packets to different units. So I had my receiver set close to the primary console. So strong reception packets are probably coming from the console, weaker reception packets coming from the keypad or motion sensor that I had to work with. And then that's just a graphic of one of the received packets with the same initial preamble. I've blacked out the content, the actual data content, and then the trailer bit at the end. So looking at a bunch of the packets, there's no fixed prefix in the payloads, so it looks like no band sync has a well-defined end to it, so presumably that's what they're using for synchronization. There's no common prefixes in the payloads, so no obvious target address. Small changes in function being used, like, for example, person A doing an arm versus person B doing an arm, or person A doing an arm and person A doing a disarm. Even with those like localizing changes in the function being executed, resulted in bit changes spread throughout the data packets. So no obvious command address fields. Presumably, just based at this point, it was like, well, obviously the comms are either encrypted or at least just scrambled or whitened. Although that could be with a per site code exchange as part of the enrollment process for new devices. I'm not going to be showing any of the actual packet payloads. Instead, in the captures, I'm going to be showing here all of labeled. So these are just going to be just the dumped JSON output that I've collected. I'll be labeling the packets with a capital letter X and an X for the 32-bit packets, 2 capital letters for the 64-bit packets, and a double star for the wake up signal from the console. Any packet with the same label have exactly the same payload. And over about a month of just running capture, I saw 33 distinct packets. So clearly there's clearly no time or sequence component in whatever is being done to the packet contents. So despite the fact that we can't look at the packets and easily go, okay, so this bit here is a command field and that means disarm, whatever. Yeah, there's not a lot of, the packets are effectively opaque tokens, but they're reused very heavily. So business as usual, just when there's nothing interesting going on, every 4 minutes and 1/3 of a second, the console transmits a wake up and then a sequence of 8 packets, which are the AX to HX packets. And so here we see at 103.5, wake up. So this is just a straight dump out of my collected data. Wake up packet, AX to HX, 4 minutes later, so at 107, wake up, AX to HX. I assume that this is the watchdog that it uses for jamming detection for the central console to determine whether there's anything bad going on. In the case of motion being detected by one of the motion detectors, if it sees motion, it transmits a stream of, once again, constant packets, which are the MX packets here, every half second or so. And as long as it sees motion, it goes, hey, there's motion. I've got here a couple of disarms done by the same user of the system, a day apart. The second one is substantially longer. So there's so the first one occurs over about 3 seconds. The second one also over about 3 seconds, but there's a lot more traffic during that period. If we take those 2 captures and put them side by side, and so I'm attributing the packets based just on my dinky signal strength. So we see a transmission of a 64-bit packet, which I gave the AK designation from the keypad in both cases, an IX or two IX responses from the console. So that's a short packet back from the console. On the second run, there's this sequence, and so that's exactly the same between the two disarm operations that were logged. On the second disarm, there's this sequence of AH, so that's a 64-bit packet from the console and a short response from the keypad. AH, same short response, and then AC response, AC response. The K, as far as I can tell, or I'm assuming, the IX packet from the console is just an acknowledgement response. And the KX response from the keypad is similarly just an acknowledgement from the keypad. So this sequence here only occurred during one of these two particular disarm operations. And then the rest of the disarm is identical between the two runs. So an AJ packet from the console, acknowledgement from the keypad, repeat of the AJ, acknowledgement, and then AC acknowledge, AB acknowledge, so there's not really a lot changing here. It's not entirely static. The sequence isn't entirely static, but even without knowing what any of these packet contents actually mean, well, can we synthesize a disarm? Like, we've got the packets, we don't know what they mean, but we know what sequence we're meant to be exchanging them with the console. So in theory, we should be able to collect a disarm sequence and then at some stage pretend to be the keypad and just spit pre-cooked packets at the console following this sequence that we've collected, and then win, except I didn't win. So I wasn't able to make this work. There's a few possibilities that spring to mind as to why not. I think the most likely is I didn't get the timing right. So I was detecting the inbound packets from the console using my Lua radio stuff, and then doing transmission by then basically telling HackRF transfer to send out a small pre-cooked packet. And I suspect that the turnaround between reception and transmission was just too long, and the console was giving up or going, there's something not right or whatever. If it thought there was something not right, it didn't report it in a way that anyone found out about or told me. Other possibility is I'm misattributing some of the packets between console and keypad. Possible, but unlikely. The signal strengths are very clearly different between the two different sets of data. My receiver was next to the console. Those are the ones that I've marked, like the strong reception ones, the ones I've marked as console. Also, the first transmission was on the weaker group, and given that these were disarms initiated from the keypad, I'm assuming I've got that the right way around. Other possibility is there's some other channel that I'm missing, and so I was only carrying out part of the communication. I don't think that's the case. There's no indication in the product literature of anything other than RF in 433 and 868. I couldn't find anything else in either of those, or 902 and up to the 915 to 928 low interference band that you're actually meant to use in Australia. I couldn't find any other traffic that correlated time-wise with these activities, so I'm pretty sure that I'm not missing a comms channel. So yeah, I suspect that my bodgy receive transmit process just wasn't meeting whatever timing requirements the console had. So I wasn't able to do a disarm. But like, why do we want to disarm anyway? That's going to show up in logs somewhere. Presumably someone's going to see those one day, particularly if the place gets cleared out. When there's a disarm, if it's out of hours, the alarm monitoring company is going to notice that and do whatever they get paid to do. Someone's going to get a phone call. Like, yeah, you know, depending on what your purposes are, disarming is not really going to give you that much of a win. But the motion report packets are entirely static. And the same thing with door open and presumably glass break. So we can do...
Those sensors are wireless or wired?
Wireless. Everything's wireless.
Everything's wireless.
Yeah.
The glass breakage and the door open.
All wireless. All of the comms from the sensors to the console is RF. So we can potentially do reflexive jamming. Watch for the start of the packets that we don't want the console to receive. When you see that, start jamming, and you know, hopefully you'll get the end of the packet enough to corrupt the data before the console can do anything, or you know, and corrupt the data enough that the console won't recognize it as something it needs to take action on. To do this, you need fast turnaround between detecting the start of the packet. So you don't want to jam everything, because then the jamming detection comes in. So you want to detect specifically the motion or door open, window open notifications, uniquely identify them, and then start jamming. In the data set that I collected, packets 27 millisecond long, sorry. In the data that I collected, I could identify the motion reports in the first 12.8 milliseconds. So you need to turn around and start doing actual jamming within less than 14.2 milliseconds. That wasn't going to work with the bodgy setup that I had. And it's like, okay, I could start writing firmware for like an RF SoC, but again, I'm lazy and I couldn't be bothered doing that. Alternatively, console sends a heartbeat out to all of the remote units every 4 minutes. Absolute clockwork. Well, 4 minutes and 1/3 of a second, because it drifts slightly. But anyway, absolute clockwork. That is trivial to detect. Same sequence of packets every time, every 4 minutes. So what if we just look out for those, jam everything when the watchdog isn't watching, and then stop jamming when it's doing it. Hey, is everyone okay? And everyone goes, yeah, we're all right. And then you start jamming again. So wait for the heartbeat to complete. Start jamming for 230 seconds. Start looting the joint. Stand still. Wait for 10 seconds. Rinse and repeat. So you get 3 minutes, 50 seconds to do whatever the hell you like. Stand still for 10 seconds, off you go again. Works great. No indication from the system that there was actually problems. The trouble light didn't come on. There were no logged jamming events. So as long as you're capable of standing still for 10 seconds out of every 4 minutes, you can do whatever you want. My to-dos with this, grab a keypad and try and like look at comms with the keypad in isolation. Since I don't have a console to enroll it against, I have no idea whether that would actually produce useful data. Move the keypad out of range and relay the communications to basically get the same effect of being able to fully attribute the data and interfere with the data comms between a keypad and the console. That's disruptive for the person who owns the alarm, so they didn't, well, I didn't ask, but if I'd asked, they probably would have gone, nah, no, we don't want you taking the keypad away. Or alternatively, dump keypad RAM and firmware and I just couldn't be asked. Given that I effectively won, and it was just like, no point doing anything else. So given that this was with a little bit of effort, pretty easy to break and would lead to the premises in question getting cleared out, what did the owner think? Well, actually, they didn't care. Their threat, like what they care about is junkies coming in and clearing out the place for stuff to sell, like cash converters. They're not worried about like ninjas, tech ninjas breaking in. So, you know, the alarm fits their use and presumably the use of people who have got them installed. So, whatever. Yeah, so that was, that's my walkthrough a particular entry-level commercial alarm system that I was hoping would be less easy to break, but it turned out to not actually, well, I mean, you know, it's fit for purpose. It's just, its purpose isn't super flash. Yeah, so that's that. Yeah.
A few questions from.
Just before we go.
Oh, sorry.
Questions. You want to?
Yeah. Yep.
Just to be honest.
You finish the presentation.
Yep.
You know what the system actually is made of as a console and so many sensors and what kind of sensors they are.
Yes.
You do know that in front?
Yeah.
You're doing the whole exercise.
Yeah, okay, so the question was, did I know up front about like what the actual components are? So down here was, so this stuff here. Yeah, so I was aware of that up front. Before I actually asked the owner of the alarm system if they'd mind me having a poke at it, I'd seen the keypad on the wall at their site, and it's got the branding up the top, and then the internet shows you what the components of the full alarm system are. Later on, I got the owner of the system to just show me the console, just out of curiosity, and it's just a box bolted to the wall. There's no UI on that at all. So I started with no knowledge greater than you could than you'd have just by doing a simple physical recon.
Doing a scale, radio scale.
Yep.
You've got some information as how many frequencies, what frequency is, or is that information coming from? Okay,
so that question was what information I had about the radio frequencies and the communications. So the manufacturer's website, product brochures, all listed, well, they said 433 and 868. I then just ran a capture in both of those bands. Well, I started in 433 because that's the only legal one to use in Australia, and hopefully the Australian distributor only provisions them in the right band. So I ran a capture in 433. In practice, I was on site and I had my laptop there. You could, you know, approaching this as a pure black box exercise, you could drop an RPI with an RTL SDR, you know, out on the street out the front or in a rubbish bin, or, you know, conceal it somewhere and come back in a day and pick it up.
Do a triathlon.
Yeah. So, you know, my process was a little easier than it would be for an actual attacker. But there's nothing stopping an actual attacker from gaining the same information that I did. Yeah.
So can you just in that 3 minutes and 50 seconds,
yep,
jam the signal and then disable the motion sensor and then replacing your own replay of the watchdog?
Okay, so the question was, could I, in that 3 minute, 50 second window of opportunity, disable or do something to disable the motion sensor and replace it with my own. Quite possibly. I didn't want to mess with the watchdog with any of the 4-minute watchdog signals, just because I didn't know if that would result in an alarm being sent to the alarm monitoring people, and then the person who's generously let me do this gets annoyed by phone calls. So I did nothing to mess with the watchdog signal or responses. Given that everything's static, yeah, I'm sure you could. I got to the point where it's just like, you've got 3 minutes 50, and then you stand still for 10 seconds, and you've got as many, you can repeat that as long as you want, and just went, okay, well, there's not a huge amount of point in going further. But given the behaviour of the system, I would certainly assume that you could, basically, tear down, pull the batteries out, otherwise disable all of the sensors and send synthetic watchdog responses, and everything would be fine. But yeah, I'd want to have like a full deployment, including the console to play with, to make sure it was actually going to work and not start triggering alarms.
For your analysis, what tools did you use with the Spectrum?
Yeah, so where are we? So yeah, that's just grabbed out of InSpectrum. So I used HackRF for transmit, for logging and jamming, InSpectrum, and a bunch of stuff that I put together in Lua Radio, which is just, pretty ugly, but it does the job. My stuff. Lua Radio is nice. My stuff is ugly, but does the job. But, that's the equivalent tool chain would just be, for anyone else, could just be, a radio with transmit and receive and InSpectrum and new radio.
And how much is this alarm retail?
Question was, how much is the alarm retail for? I have no idea. The target, just given where I've seen them, the target is sort of small businessy stuff. And the site that I particularly know, they got it as part of an alarm monitoring package. So I wouldn't be shocked if it actually costs next to nothing and the alarm monitoring company makes all their money off service. Just given the keypads and stuff, I think they were sort of like, $30 to $50 on Amazon. I didn't look at a price for the console. I would expect to be, several hundreds up to 500 or something, but I don't know. No. And how do I? Yeah, I'm trying to get the mouse on that screen. There, okay, cool.